All right, now we are going from environmental law to environmental agencies. The EPA was established in 1970, was responsible for the establishment and enforcement of air and water quality standards. They require testing and regulation of toxic chemical substances entering the environment. Enforcement activities are often limited by budgetary restrictions and political factors. So if you don't really follow their laws, it's like who's going to come after you, which is pretty sad. Some states care more than others. International initiatives. So the UN Convention to Combat Desertification of 1996 addressed localized problems found around the world, and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change recognized the role of CO2 and other greenhouse gases in global warming, encourages nations to report their CO2 emissions, and encourages developed nations to assist developing nations to address increasing dumping of CO2 into the atmosphere. So the thought is that the development nations not only caused the problem, but also have more money to fix the problem, and that they're supposed to aid the poorer countries that aren't developed, help them come up with clean energy sources and give them money also not only for clean energy sources, but to help them when they have climate related disasters that were effectively caused by, countries like us. So it tries to be equitable. And then here's just a graph showing the number of international environmental treaties that have been signed. It's definitely increasing. So globally, there's been a large recognition of environmental concerns. The Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer in 1987 was an attempt to have all nations recognize the need for international commitments to pollution control for everyone's benefit. And this was really successful. However, successful in that everybody signed it. A lot of the CFCs have depleted. However, these HC, CHC, I don't know, whatever these, not all of them have depleted. Some have gone up. And then this nitrous oxide here is going up. And then at the time, in 1987, we didn't even realize that this was an ozone depleting chemical. So it wasn't even mentioned. Um, and it was a precautionary principle. So usually laws happen, something bad happens. It's like, well, that was stupid. Now we're going to make a law to prevent that from happening again. We didn't actually see the effects of the ozone depletion. We did it in advance. The science said, hey, we're going to get more of these UVC rays coming in. It's going to cause a lot more cancer and all these other things. We need to fix this. And so they did it preventatively instead of reactionary. Anyways, they prevented it instead of being reactive to like, oh no, that was bad. Um, and so that's good. And we probably need more of this where science is ahead of what disasters could happen and we stop it. Um, let's see. Attempt to have industrialized nations agree to reduce greenhouse. Okay, so 1997 there was an attempt to have industrialized nations reduce greenhouse emissions 5% below their 1990 levels. That did not happen. The U.S. expressed concerns over the economic impact and did not agree to these standards. The U.S. has kind of flip-flopped on joining these with greenhouse gases. International initiatives, common but differentiated responsibilities of states. This is, I think, what I was referring to earlier. The concept that all nations share responsibility for protecting the global environment, which makes sense. We're all people. We all need the earth to live. However, some nations have contributed more to pollution problems than others. Nations that create more of the problem and can better afford the cost of addressing it are expected to do more towards a solution because you're supposed to have more money. Here's a graph showing global warming contributions over the 20th century, which looks like we're definitely in the lead. With 30.3%, and then Europe not far behind. And then here's a graph here of 2000 where we were definitely in the lead, but in 2020, China overtook us. That's probably partly because of our EPA standards where we might have gotten a little bit better. But definitely China is no longer developing and is developed and doesn't have the same regulations we do. So I'm not really sure how much that is that we improved versus just China got a lot. Cost benefit analysis. So the National Center of Ecological Analysis and Synthesis went through and attempted to give a monetary value to what they called ecosystem services, which are things just any ecosystem. And they try to say, okay, like what good does this ecosystem provide humanity, whether it's a swamp and how swamps provide, these animals and they filter the water, or if it's a reef system or dunes or forest, what good does forest do? Okay, well, it's a carbon dioxide sink, but it also is shade. It has all the animals, right? And so they tried to give a monetary value so that they could do a cost benefit analysis and say, okay, if you're going to destroy this ecosystem, what are you losing in money for what you'll gain in money? And it's a really good concept, but like this, giving these ecosystems a monetary value when we don't fully understand how they work, yeah, we probably didn't give it enough of a monetary value. It's probably much higher than what it's been assessed at. Numerical estimates of ecosystem services depend on what type of service is being assessed. So cost of provisionary, cost of regulate. Oh, so then they take into effect like the cost of regulating the service, like keeping it clean, as well as recreational value. And then the value that, the ecosystem itself provides humanity. Like how do you put a price tag on clean water, you know? Um, Cost benefits analysis with the federal government. President Reagan in 1981 allowed um, a regulation to go into effect only if the potential benefits outweighed the potential cost when you do the cost benefit analysis. So if it wasn't worth the work of trying to clean it or prevent it, then he didn't want it to pass. And so because of that, it weakened the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act because when they were put into place, they didn't do a cost benefit analysis. And some of the, like, I don't know what you call them, like sub laws, some of those things in these acts might not have been worth the cost. But again, it's like I said, how do you know really what the cost is of saving that? Like, we probably undervalued it. Um, However, this is what I was going to say earlier. I think the book says Bush tried to put in like a Clean Skies Act where the cost benefit analysis, it was so like the benefit so outweighed the cost of doing it, and yet it still didn't even pass. It's kind of ridiculous. You think it'd be common sense. And that is it. We will jump to geologic hazards.